Okay, good evening, everybody. The room will be filling in for about 25 seconds or so. We have a poll. Just tell us who you are. We know most of you are going to be IECs and educators, but it's something that we always ask when we open webinars. And there'll be some other folks coming in as well. But take a minute, if you could, just answer those couple of questions very simply. And the room is starting to fill. We always have a query of how many folks will come from the folks who are signed up. It's always the question. Um, but all right, you know what? I think we're starting to hit something of a plateau here. So let me say, welcoming, good evening, everybody. I'm Jed Appleruth. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Bob Carlton, out in Texas. So we have Atlanta in Texas, and you're from all over the place. Tonight we're talking about optimizing AI in your practice. We have given this talk before at a conference in Atlanta, and it was very well attended, and also both at ICA and HECA. So Bob is, of everybody I know who's interested in AI, I think Bob knows the most and sends me the most resources and keeps me up to date on things, which I share. And then I either excite or scare my friends with, this morning, one of my best friends, David, I sent him the post from the Atlantic, and he was like, "This is horrifying." He was like, he was scared. I'm like, "Dude, it's exciting." And it mentioned Dune, and I love Dune. And anyone who leads with Frank Herbert is a winner in my book. So, but anyhow, we both like AI, talk about AI, learn about AI. We're using AI in our work and our practices. Bob has developed multiple applications which he uses for his practice. And here at Appleruth, we're looking at for problem generation, for teaching education. We are deep in it, and also how to make our business run better. I'm part of the team at Appleruth looking at how to use this new technology and make sure we aren't left behind, because if we don't use it, our competitors are going to be. And so that's something that we're looking at very closely. All right, but let's jump in. The roles we're going to play tonight. Let me begin the deck. And we're going to send you a copy of this presentation. We're going to record it, and we'll mail you the link once we render it. The two experts today. Yes, I love my hair. And my beard was so dark. It's like a few years ago. It's amazing. It's mostly white these days. And Bob and I are here, and these are images, obviously, from AI. Yeah, and so DALL-E 3 can make fun things. You plug it in and tell it what you want, and you can turn any photo you want into whatever you want. So that's me and Bob, looking good. All right. Oh, and the Bitly, Bob, I'm going to ask you to do a quick lead in here on the Bitly.
Absolutely. There are a bunch of resources that we're going to reference tonight. Some of y'all have seen these resources before. In my section, I'm going to talk about a guide for AI and essay work. So here's the bit.ly. It has resources, and that's it.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. So we have our primary objectives for today: insights into what's happening with AI. Some of you may be fans like us and may be following this in terms of articles and podcasts and books and sessions at conferences. Some of you, this is, you've heard a little bit about it. Some of you have, the deep divers versus the shallow divers, but we've all heard about it. There's definitely varying levels of knowledge in this audience today. So we'll talk about what's happening, upcoming developments in AI, how it might affect college admissions, how it might affect college counseling. And then finally, the how to apply this. That's me, Bob. He uses this actively with his students and his practice, and then giving some insights. How do I bring this into my practice? And then that'll be the end of the hour. So thanks for being here, and we're excited to have you all as part of this. Now, my piece is kind of the broad strokes of the landscape of AI. I've been tracking this for, gosh, at least I began getting this newsletter about 12 years ago, the Singularity newsletter by Kurzweil and crew. And I've always been very fascinated by where this is going, because I love science fiction. I've been reading this since I was a kid. And the idea of these super machines that either we bow down to these great intelligences, or they help us solve problems, or they come in and destroy us. I've been tracking these stories for most of my adult life, and so I've been reading these things. And ultimately, if you don't know it by now, AI is going to change society work, geopolitics, our notions of what is true, what's not true. It'll change art and storytelling and creativity. It's going to change pretty much everything in our society. So it's a very big deal. The question is how soon, when is it coming, and depends on who you ask and to what extent. But it's going to be a very big deal. Shane Legg, the founder of DeepMind at Google, they've done a lot of great work on machine learning and deep learning. And so they said within 5 years, we have about half chance of achieving artificial general intelligence. That is essentially it's comparable to human intelligence, which we're not there right now. But we're talking about how big will the stacks be, how many, the trillion-dollar stack, the whatever it is, where there's so much computing power and it's been pre-trained on so much data that essentially it's a proxy for human intelligence. And then we go talk about super intelligence, when we eventually do and will surpass human intelligence and what that means for us. But again, this is an optimist, but there are people who are not so optimistic. Some folks think it's 10 years out, 20 years out, but there seems to be a consensus in the Valley that things are moving pretty quickly, and look out. The head of Google, Sundar Pichai, said that this technology is going to have an effect on our society that's more profound than fire or having power. So that's a huge deal, just because it's going to shift our relationship to each other, to truth, to knowledge creation. This is a different kind of technology than the wheel or fire, and so forth. So just giving you a sense of the speed. Some of you may have, about a year ago, we all heard about ChatGPT. Though I don't know if you understand just the rate of change of these various iterations between GPT-2 and 3.0 and 3.5. So GPT-4 is the paid version, and now it's for Omni, 4 That's the one that I pay for, $20 a month, and I probably will for the near, for a long time. I imagine I'll be paying for the advanced level because it's remarkably better in so many ways than the free version. If you just use the free ChatGPT, you really haven't seen the power of this tool. And GPT-4 was trained on 570 times the data of 3. And then Turbo was released and 4.0 was released in May of this year. So it's pretty new. And 5.0 is already in development because the race is really on. And Google is playing hard. And Microsoft is, their companies are throwing massive resources in the billions into this right now. So right now we have over 2 million developers who are using GPT-4 as the engine of products. So some of you may not be using GPT-4, but it's the under structure of many AI apps that are just putting a skin on top and they're adding a few instructions and everything. But the engine is pulling from the large language model that they're pulling from, which takes a ton of money to build, is GPT-4. Some folks use Facebook's Llama, other ones they license, but this GPT-4 is the most popular one, and by OpenAI, that's really a big deal. Giving you a sense of scale. So in 2018, the first GPT, and it's the generative pre-trained transformer. It was released in 2017 by Google. It's actually a pretty simple, technology in terms of the actual lines of code, but it's insanely powerful and it can generate things in mass simultaneously. The parameters, the number of things, it was the words parameters, pieces of information, 17 million in 2018. Then the next version, a year later, we're up orders of magnitude, 1.5 billion. Then a year later, 175 billion. And GPT-4, they haven't released the full data set, but there's talk about it's, 100, what is that? That is million, billion, 100 trillion. So it is just a vastly superior piece of tough technology. If you haven't played with it, you need to. And Ethan Mollick, I have his book and referenced it. We actually did a thing with his wife. They're both teachers, professors at Penn, at Wharton, and he is kind of Ethan translates what's happening to the lay people. I get his Substack, thanks to Bob who sent it to me first time, and it's very, very strong. But the idea is whatever AI you're working with now is the worst one you will ever use in your life. They're going to just get better and better and better as they're pre-training on bigger and bigger data sets, as the algorithms get more and more efficient, more expedient, quick. So things are just moving, and they're going to keep moving in this one direction. GPT-5 they've already put forth the patent. It's been trademarked. It's going to be predominantly speech-based. And that's going to be a very big change. And I'm already playing with it some with GPT-4 Omni, where I talk to it and it talks back. There are times when my wife walks in and I'm talking to my phone and I'm having this conversation. I'm learning about random things or neuroscience or the stock market. And it's explaining things to me. And so it's already conversational right now, but it's going to be much, much more of that. And also a lot more video. And you're going to be able to drop in audio or video, have it transcribe it, synthesize it, and analyze it for you and give back information. So it's very much a different technology coming. It's more of a conversation that's coming with AI, less of you typing into a bot, the more you're talking to a friend, mentor, guide kind of thing, teacher. All right, so this is something I put this in back in I think May or June, where I dropped in this picture of my wife and my two kids, and then I asked it to analyze it. What's going on here? I say, what's happening in this picture? And the output is pretty impressive. That was my only cue. What's happening here? It's a serene and heartwarming moment in a park. A woman, two young kids walking a paved path. A woman in a coral pink sleeveless dress with a blue. Remember, a couple of years ago, the question is this a cat or not a cat? Is it a dog? And then we've gotten so much further in terms of the ability for this thing to read images, understand images, and then, of course, generate images. And that's something that's really, really powerful. So it really gets what's happening in this picture. One of the use cases, I use this with my daughter. My daughter wants to hear stories again and again and again and again. And whatever the theme, right now we're talking about this crazy dolphin who always breaks the rules, Billy and Sally the dolphins. And then for a while it was popsicle stories and magic stories. Eventually I would exhaust my imagination. Like I can't think of any more things about popsicles. And I began to drop it in a GPT-4 Omni. And I'd tell it who it was. You're like C.S. Lewis, or you're a great storyteller, varied, and your audience is a 4-year-old, and tell me a story. And so when I'm tapped out with stories, I turn to this machine and it generates, I print out these pages of stories and by chapters. I'm on like chapter 7. And then I say, make me an image of Morgana the witch. Make me an image of, Alaric the wizard. Make me an image of Aslan the lion. And it takes my story, it writes me a story, and then it creates images for me from that story. My daughter loves this. It's like I'm a storybook writer with no talent. I just type it in, I give it a few lines of code, and there is my brand new story for my daughter. And she can actually help me say, let's make it in the outer space dad. Let's give it a second witch. Let's add, some helpers for the witch. And so she can help write this story, and it's new every time. It's really incredible, and the images she loves. So there's power in this. The hugest thing coming that's going to be so disruptive is the ability to generate from text video, the ability to customize movies. And there are many ways. It's going to be a huge deal. So this just started. Sora, OpenAI, who owns ChatGPT, developed this video technology called Sora. And there are a few other ones. Bob and I have been playing with them, putting in things about different prompts for show me a kid taking an SAT, show me some, and then boom, it renders a video for you. And so the only text entered here, nothing else, was, quote, a Chinese Lunar New Year celebration with dragon, and that's it. You give it to the machine and say, make me something. And now here is what it made from those 8 words or so. And this is the thing. So this whole thing came from that text. This is not copied footage. This is brand new footage made by this machine. And just one more time. So all these people, and there are imperfections in there. There's still things with some of the faces. Again, it gets better over time. But all of the buildings, they're made up. The street is made up. These people are made up. This person holding the sign, the white jacket, everything's manufactured. And it's seen millions of videos, but now it's generating from nothing. So again, this is just from a little line of text. And it's pretty good, y'all. It's pretty good now, and it's going to get insanely better to be able to customize your own movies for yourself, for your kids, for your business. So big things are coming with that. And Tyler Perry, I live in Atlanta. He has studios here and production lots here. He saw this and he put on hold his $0.8 billion studio expansion. He said, there's no reason for me to make a studio. He was going to plan this huge thing, 12 sound stages. And he said, actually seeing it was mind blowing. And so the question is, will this end up costing some jobs? Yes, it will. There's no question. That was part of the writer's strike. The writers see what this thing can do, and they're nervous, and they put in the current contract, you can't use AI to punch up text or line and make it, it's, but eventually there will be studios who don't go by this or don't go with union workers, and they begin writing and then creating actors without, with using these tools. It's gonna be very powerful. One thing that's interesting but also disturbing is some of the voice generation capacity, that with 15 seconds it can clone your voice. And this is pretty cool for if I want to speak Spanish or French or Ukrainian. Then you take my voice, my inflection, my prosody, all these things. They hear me speak, and then boom, I can type in text, and they'll speak as me in this language. That's really powerful. This is one of the reasons why we're going to see the obliteration of the call center industry. This thing is going to change. One of the many reasons. I have a friend who works for KPMG, and he's like, call centers, man, they're going to be dust. And already it's already happening with using AI to replace humans and all these different languages. But this also worries me because, again, the whole thing of can I trust you is, did you say this? If they have a really faithful voice print of me, the USAA tells me, hey, we're doing now this voice biometric thing when you call in, it's your voice. But now someone can get my voice by watching one of my videos. And so this becomes an issue. And also if someone calls you and it's, wait a minute, they stole my voice, which is the whole thing. So there's all this interesting stuff happening with voice. And this is something that is a big deal and a growing big deal, this replicant thing, where people are turning to AI now that it's, for companionship and friendship and support. I heard this great talk with Sherry Turkle. She wrote Alone Together. She's an MIT researcher and looking at how technology affects social engagement, and looking to these bots, these apps, these machines for validation. Someone may be in a marriage, then they turn to their bot to give them validation, affirmation, support. And then these things can send you pictures of themselves and send me a picture of you. And then some people are going to be dating or interacting with them in an interesting way, but it's super highly personalized, the kind of body type or image type, the kind of voice you like. You're going to be able to generate the stuff. And this may affect negatively our regular human relationships. If you're getting exactly what you want from this machine, how might that affect things with your friends or your lovers, or other things? So it's interesting what's happening with this, but it's happening now. So AI, the arms race is on. It is going on. The money's coming in. I just read the recent Alphabet released their earnings yesterday, and they put in another $13 billion in the last quarter. A lot of that was for this massive stack for their programs for AI, for Gemini. So there are billions and billions to build a big enough stack of GPUs on big enough training set of data. OpenAI, Microsoft threw in 13 million. Amazon's throwing money into Claude. Elon Musk is throwing money into Grok and XAI. So there's a lot of money, billions and billions are coming towards this software. Then you have Llama from Facebook. You have a few other free ones that are out there, open source ones, Mistral in France, and so forth. We know that right now, Claude, which is, I believe, one of Bob's preferred ones, Claude Opus is actually one of the leading ones in terms of its ability. And if you can see here what's happening with the ability to pass certain tests, certain benchmarks, Claude 3 Opus is leading on so many levels of undergraduate level of knowledge, graduate level reasoning, grade school math. Now, things are really advancing. Versus you look back a few generations and it was nothing. It was a fraction of this. So it's getting smart fast. We now know that Apple is getting very involved. The same as Google now. When you do search, Google, they're having these AI render generated thing on the very top line versus you going to websites. Apple as well wants to plug AI into so many things in terms of scheduling, in terms of having it be this smart thing behind everything in your iPhone. So there's AI coming everywhere. So if you say I don't use AI, you're using AI all the time. It's just kind of the background of all these things that you do use. And you've been using AI, like Netflix's algorithm is AI. There's AI everywhere. If you have a smart thermostat, that's AI. AI is all over the place. It's just we're getting to a different level of generative AI that's going up. NVIDIA, the stock has dipped about 10% in the past month, but just showing you, I wish we all had invested in this stock. NVIDIA is the only company right now who makes the GPUs. And they found out that, we have all these other chips from Intel, other things that they're good at. But to maintain graphics processor units, graphics, they have to render millions of pixels simultaneously, be ready to change them, and have different things with different weights. And they found out this actually is really amazing for AI, that these things that were designed to help, render a video game image on a screen are the backbone of AI systems. So NVIDIA, the reason their valuation went, 2.5, 1,000% up is because they're the ones who are the leading developer of this technology, and the sky, maybe they'll double in value because they're building bigger and bigger stacks, which is, these are the things they're building. These processors are just, layered and layered and layered to manage so much data and build these large language models. So GPUs are the backbone of AI. Now, the arms race is going to be eventually a real arms race. We see China doing drills of taking over Taiwan. We see Trump talking about, demanding a fee for our protection of Taiwan. One of the companies, if you haven't heard of it, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, they make the majority of really high-end, like, the chips that power our military, that power so much of our stuff, that build the GPUs. They're foundry free, that they take TSMC's, they take the designs from NVIDIA, which is in California, and they build these things over there. So if China takes Taiwan, it could cause a global catastrophe. It could set back the global economy by 3 years. If you want a book to read that's really good, The Chip War, it talks about why this is happening in Taiwan, how the US helped support this industry, how the guy came over from, the founder was from the Texas Instruments in Texas, went over there, and then we gave them contracts to counter Japan's rise in the 80s and 90s. And so we've helped Taiwan rise, but now China kind of wants Taiwan. So this is going to affect a lot, this military security. And there are people who believe that eventually the US government gets more involved with AI, and, is, getting more involved with production and making sure Taiwan doesn't fall in the hands of the Chinese. So things are happening. So there's some research about AI, what's going on. Generative AI, GPT, and the like, could increase productivity by about 40%. We haven't really had big increases in productivity in decades in the US. We thought that the .com thing would see huge gains. There were some gains, but email, things haven't really popped. But AI looks like it will make us more efficient, companies more profitable. There's going to be more automation, but there's a whole issue about jobs. That's going to be a challenge. But many managers, but half of them are using generative AI. ChatGPT increases knowledge worker productivity, and it could automate about a third of job tasks within about 5-6 years. So this is all real. There was a big study that was, Ethan Mollick over at Penn was involved with this. They plugged in with the BCG consulting group, and they found that the people who used ChatGPT 4 outperformed consultants who did not by quite a bit. Higher task efficiency, higher speed, and higher quality. So using AI helps with all these different performance tasks that they would have consultants do. And one of the coolest things is the lowest performers, the weakest performers in the teams had the biggest pops. And so the idea is that AI could be the great leveler. And that's the thing, like people who aren't great writers, you give them this powerful tool, suddenly they go from being the worst writers to pretty good writers. Whereas really great writers, it pops a little bit, but not nearly as much. People who aren't great at math or great at grammar, other things, people who aren't great artists, you give them these tools, suddenly, voila, I'm a decent artist. People who aren't great designers. So it really does level the field for all but the very top echelon of creators. And honestly, I'm a painter myself, and there are times I struggle when I spend 3 hours making a painting. Then I go and plug in I spend 8 seconds, put a prompt in, and it can make a painting that's pretty darn good in like 5 seconds. And so I feel very humbled as an artist myself. And so Ethan again said a human working with an AI outperforms all but the very best humans working without an AI. So eventually we're all going to be using these systems because they just take us to a different level if you know how to use it and use it well. AI is really good academically. I've been watching this at Apple Ruth because we teach kids, and GPT-4, and there are companies like Khan Academy developed Khanmigo, which is powered by GPT-4. And already GPT-4 is scoring in 5s on AP Bio, Psych, Stats, Micro, Macro, Environmental. It's up to a 1410 SAT. Eventually, that'll be perfect. Give it time. It's already blowing away the bar exam and crushing the GRE verbal. And again, huge gains just from the most recent iteration. So things are moving very quickly. It's getting very smart, approaching general human intelligence. So Homework. Lilac Malik, Ethan's wife, talks about any homework assignment, if you can prompt it right, can be done by AI. And there was research out of Harvard that one student for several weeks did an experiment. This is the niece of Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook, Google. And over 2 weeks, all the assignments were done by GPT-4. This kid ended up getting like a 3.6 at Harvard. Every single thing was done by GPT-4, nothing by humans. And so it's getting smart. And there's a whole thing of, well, people can detect AI. Not really. If, AI detection is not strong, the only way they can tell is if you are not a good writer and suddenly you become an amazing writer, they know something is different. The same thing as if you have your dad write your essay or whatever. Some things change, but ultimately it's a coin flip. There's so many false positives, so many examples where, because it's, again, looking at all of human language, the most likely next word in a sequence. So if you write like the average writer, it's going to think that you are AI, but you're not. It's just how I write. Versus if you write really esoterically and strangely, it'll say you probably aren't AI. But a lot of people, they put in their text and it says, this is AI, but it's actually just the way the kid writes. So it's full of false positives, which renders it pretty useless. And so Ethan again says a lot of things are going to break. We have to decide, what we're doing. I'm not trying to fight it. You can't fight this. And it's going to be tough to fight it. Colleges are using it right now to craft messages to students. They're direct messages to them. They're mining student data using AI to analyze. They're summarizing student records right now. They're reading and reviewing essays right now. They're doing all this lead gen, pulling pools of data, doing some career advising, exploration, generating engagement scores for kids who might be applying to the school. They're screening essays for keywords and themes, and they're personalizing communications back to students who are interacting with bots and sending emails, saving time for the admissions officers. So this is already happening today, not in a year, not in 5 years, it's happening right now. Essay review is here. On a recent, Jeff Selingo did a webinar, I think it was in May, that Miami said, yep, we're using it. And this fall, we're going to be reading and reviewing essays for you, Miami students. We're excited to try to use it to read features, to see if it helps streamline the process to getting to a greater degree. So essentially, they're looking at it and also they're scanning it for keywords and looking for trends and so forth. Chatbots. So many schools are using chatbots that are powered by AI. They put in their own data, their own documents to personalize it with the back end of a large language model to make sure that it can read and analyze text and so forth. And it's giving them back and forth accurate data about what's, and Panther has had this at Georgia State, the Panther bot for years, and now many schools are using this. They're giving out links to chatbots. Some kid sends an email in at 2 in the morning. There's a link back, try the bot, and then boom, it saves them all this time for the repetitive, boring tasks. And it frees them up for more useful, deeper, meaningful tasks versus having the same question asked 1,000 times, which drives admissions officers, mind numb. Now, coaching it, part of it, one of the big things Ethan talks about is you have to tell the large language model who it is. Because again, it's pointing to the middle. It's pointing, in terms of stats, what's the next average word of all the texts I've been trained on? And if you want to give it specialized, I want you to be an expert in this. I want you to have this tone. I want you to be more funny, less funny, more satirical, very serious, much more accurate. You tell it who it is and who the audience is and what you're good at. You're really, really good at answering questions for teenagers. And then that helps train it how to respond appropriately. You can guide it towards novelty versus average responses. And you can tell it, you're an expert, you're masterful at this and novel ideas. So I'm going to hand things off to my friend and colleague, Bob Carlton.
Well, thanks, Jed. Many of you know that I would talk about AI at the drop of a hat. My family actually puts me on a quota of how much time I can spend talking about AI. And yet, I've now heard Jed go through that fire hose that he just did for 30 minutes 3 times. Every time my little ring that tests and checks my health tells me your heart rate has gone up. This is overwhelming. There's a lot of information, a lot of change, and as many podcasts as you can listen to or books that you can read. It's more uncertainty than it is certainty right now. So I want to encourage everybody on a Zoom to put your 2 feet on the ground, to breathe in, to breathe out, and to realize you got this. When we hear from folks who helped build this profession, like Steve Antonoff, say, you know what? Artificial intelligence is great when we use it in tandem with our lived wisdom. We got this. So, given that, now let's talk about what does it mean for us as IECs and college counselors. Next slide. There you go. So in December, we did a survey, got overwhelmed with responses, about 300 different people across the country and around the globe. And what people basically said is, I'm a little worried that AI is going to make my role less valuable. That as a college counselor or as IEC, that some of the things I do may get automated and potentially might get replaced. Next slide. Now, that really has played out over the last 6 months with a little more detail about how AI is being used right now. As Jed said, Jeff Salingo and Rick Clark, they seem to do almost weekly webinars that are fabulous, talking about what's going on, what the trends are. About 70% of IECs and school counselors assume that this year colleges will use AI. The Salingo webinar had 4 different schools talking about it. Somebody asked, what is Miami using? Right now, people aren't saying the tools they use. So you don't have colleges saying, hey, I'm using beta in Slate or a tool called X, or even the schools that are using AI for essay detection, they're not saying publicly the tools they're using. I think one of the things that's striking is that college counselors and IECs are a little worried that this use of AI will be a black box, that the years or decades of experience we have understanding how Duke or Georgia State or Howard, how those schools are going to evaluate a student is going to become either opaque or a complete black box, that we won't know how AI is going to change how kids are actively evaluated. And I would say if you take a snapshot of a year ago to now, a year ago, the conversation among folks who work with high school students was, we're really worried students will cheat. That was the big topic. A year later, I would say that's being balanced, if not eclipsed, by a growing understanding of just how actively colleges are going to use AI in their college admissions and review process. Now, the student concern is still there. Both the ACT and a survey we did indicated that about 13% of students used AI last year in their essays or some other part of applications. A lot of kids thought about it, but I think the heartening thing is that most kids don't want to cheat. But I would say that increasingly, some kids are looking at AI not as cheating, but as a conversation partner. And then I would say the other thing that college counselors and IECs are struggling with is, how do you talk about ethical use? We're not classroom educators. We're not in a situation where we're given the implicit or explicit power to say you failed this assignment. And yet we have a pretty unique relationship with students. Next slide. So given that, it's amazing to me that 67 people took a break from reading essay drafts to jump on this Zoom. I hope it's a distraction, but what I would say is that right now you have thousands of college counselors and IECs helping kids try to beat the bot, helping kids write essays that are better than an essay that they could have written with ChatGPT or Claude, or an essay that is better than the bot that Miami's going to use to read that essay. One of our essay coaches pointed out to us that the real value of working with a student on her essays is brainstorming, is the wisdom that we bring. Frankly, very few of us are as good as Grammarly. Grammarly is the most widely used college essay AI tool in the galaxy because most people use Grammarly. And we have a PhD professional proofer for large media companies, and she says, I gave up trying to be better than Grammarly. It's great at redlining text. But in the same sentence, she said, that's not why I do this. I mean, I enjoy it. She always jokes. She misses her red pencil to circle a word, to underline it 3 times. But she said the real joy and the privilege is to help a kid brainstorm. The real value, to go back to that survey of IECs and college counselors saying, hey, we're worried about how AI will impact our value. The real value is wisdom, it's empathy, it's brainstorming. That's how a student will beat the bot. We jokingly say to parents, synthetic essays have been around for decades. And as great as ChatGPT is right now, it's much weaker at synthetic writing than Dad GPT is. We've all read essays that read like a dad has written a marketing piece. And so if there's anything you take away from this section, I urge you to talk to colleagues. I urge you to think about and reflect. What are you going to do in August, September, October to double down on helping the kids that you work with beat the bot? Because the value that we offer has to be we're better than a series of responses in ChatGPT around dropping the University of California prompt and or the Common App prompt and saying, write my essay. Great. My TED Talk is over on beating the bot. Let's move to the next slide. So we have a couple of resources at College Matchpoint. We love giving stuff away free. We just think it's confusing and hard to figure out. And so we have a checklist that we've built that our essay coaches use. As Jed mentioned, we sort of have come to the conclusion that Turnitin and other AI text tools are not just worthless, they're potentially dangerous. I will confess to all 66 of y'all that I am a graduate of Texas A&M University. Texas A&M University a year ago was one of the schools that had an infamous AI incident. In a grad level class, a faculty member, after the final exam, failed all 37 students because the faculty member said, I ran a test and all of you used ChatGPT to write your final paper. A day and a half later, a clever Aggie grad student gave an interview with a Houston newspaper and said, we ran the syllabus for that class through an AI detection tool. Our teacher used ChatGPT to write the syllabus. AI detection tools, we feel like, don't help our work with students. What does help our work with students is to really start thinking about, is this an essay that lacks any personal anecdote, specific details? If a student comes to us with a writing draft and we've been working with her for several semesters, is this just totally different in style, in formality or sophistication of language? And then the last thing that we really try to look at is the same thing that great essay coaches have done for decades. And that is this personal? Is this specific? Is this an essay that only she can write? So we have a little checklist that our essay coaches use, and then we have a guide that we give away to students. It's also on the website page that I shared the link for earlier. It's free, you can use it yourself. And what we're basically trying to do is say to kids, if you really are just showing up to the essay world right now, and let's face it, many kids are, as much as we try to help them get an early start, your opportunity is to beat the bot, is to write a better essay. Now, let's turn our attention from essays to a broader sense of how AI gives us the opportunity to get involved. Um, when you have an AI conversation, particularly when it's in person, I always look at my watch and try to figure out how long was it before someone mentioned a podcast on AI. I am relatively certain 2/3 of all podcasts would go away if they couldn't do episodes on AI. Okay. Oddly enough, my favorite series on AI this year is Brene Brown. She had 4 different podcasts with really diverse voices. And one of them is a guy that I actually went to church with, a guy named Craig Watkins. He's a professor at University of Texas at Austin. I won't read the quote to you. I will give you the too long didn't read. We can't leave this up to computer scientists or engineers. Look at social media. We hoped Facebook would get it right, and now we're living with the destruction of having not been involved in that conversation. As educators, as people who work with teenagers, my ask to all of us is to get off the sidelines, is to be involved in the conversation with colleagues, yes, with family members, with fellow educators, because we can't put this in the hands only of computer scientists and engineers. Now, what does that mean in terms of getting involved in the conversation? Jed, next slide. 4 things I'm going to beg you to do. 4 things. Number one, experiment with these tools. When I talk to IECs, one of the most encouraging things is that compared even to 6 months ago, people are playing with tools. Most of them people don't like. I don't either. Some of these tools are absurd. Some of these tools aren't as bad as they were 6 months ago. And some of these tools are helping IECs and college counselors do a better job in their business and with students. Uh, Jed mentioned we like a tool called Claude. It's a competitor to ChatGPT. We like it for a bunch of reasons, basically because it writes more like a human being than ChatGPT. We don't use AI tools to code. We're not software developers. ChatGPT is great at coding, like stone cold great. And then we pretty much have liked a tool called Perplexity. It's like if ChatGPT and Google had a baby. So it feels a little bit more like a search engine. And we liked it until 11:34 a.m. today when ChatGPT said we're coming out with a search engine called Search GPT, and it looks identical to Perplexity. That being said, it's a really good search tool. A lot of IECs that I know use it when they're first building a college list, or they use it to do a deeper dive on research. Then the second thing I'm begging you to do, keep up with AI experiments in our profession. Now, don't do this as a full-time job because all you're going to do is look at listservs from NACAC or IECA, and you're going to get bored. But once a month, keep up with the experiments. There's some interesting ones. College Guidance Network has announced a beta that they're going to roll out this fall. Kamingo, Jed talked about. The third, and I would say the most important takeaway on my part of this, you need to get better at prompt crafting. And in a minute, I'll fill in what I mean by that. And then fourth and most important, don't try to be a geek. Don't pretend to be a nerd. Let your personal values, your brand, what makes your practice unique, and your comfort level with tech guide your choices. Now, let me unpack that a little bit more so you can think about this game plan and figure out how you fit it into the busiest time of the year in your business. I mentioned before Conmingo. Jed mentioned it a little earlier. 2 days ago, Conmingo rolled out a essay component to their tutoring system. It's called Writing Coach. I've spent about 3 hours over the last 2 days playing with it. It's really good. If I didn't have a college counselor or an English tutor that I was working with, I would feel like, thank you, Sal Khan. You just saved my life as a 10th or an 11th grader. It's really, really good. And the truth of the matter is that most kids don't have access to someone who at 11:30 at night who can coach them side by side. The tool is 2 days old. If Conmingo does what they've continued to do, they'll get it out there, let students play with it, and improve it, improve it, improve it. Conmingo is predominantly used on the writing and humanities side right now. Conmingo last week, the developer of it gave an article where they publicly confessed on the math side of our product, we actually send the math questions to a calculator rather than them being fixed by ChatGPT, because ChatGPT isn't dependable with math right now. Next slide. Another experiment that's out there, this one's about 9 months old and it really hasn't gotten much traction, is CollegeVine rolled out a tool that they're going to sell to colleges where a student would be able 24/7 to interact with a recruiter from that school, get more information, and then ultimately go deeper into their connection. It's sort of like the first wave of chatbots. Georgia State is great. Their chatbot is killer. This is sort of that chatbot on steroids to really help kids get more engaged with schools. Next slide. These are some of the ones. One thing I've discovered being an AI nerd, a lot of them use the term Ivy in the name of their system. You know, who knew? Dr. Ivy rolled out at the end of last year's essay coaching system. It's basically a pay-to-play AI essay coaching tool. Ivy is a tool that's being sold to colleges, but most importantly to independent high schools. And then the next slide, Jed. We, College Matchpoint, have done two different tools, and I don't want to take the whole time, but I want to tell you what we've learned. So historically, College Matchpoint has done a lot of stuff around helping kids plan their summer. And this isn't primarily for our clients, it's for all kids. So we have a database and we have a web page, and it's been around for 6 years, and tons of people use it. A year ago, we realized bluntly the majority of those kids don't work with a college counselor or an IEC, and they can't tell you, I want the best biomedical engineering 1 week pre-college program on the East Coast. They're a civilian. They basically are saying, I like the beach and hanging out with my girlfriend. And so what we did is we built a simple bot. Jed, a couple of slides earlier, basically explained how we do it. We use an off-the-shelf system. It's called My Ask AI. We point it to our database. We train it on the kind of questions kids will ask. 100,000 kids plan their summer with this tool this spring. We were bluntly overwhelmed. We were prepared for maybe 1,000. And what we learned is that kids are doing this right now, hard stop. Most of the surveys say that half of kids every week use AI in some way in their homework assignments. And a real challenge, I think, for all of us as folks who've been around maybe a little longer than a teenager, is that very few of them use it to full-scale cheat. They don't put the assignment in and say, write the assignment. They use it as a conversation partner, an always-on tutor, someone to challenge their ideas. In our tool, 13% of the questions are in a non-English language, and the answers are responded in a non-English language. And half of the prompts come in between 11 p.m. at night and 4 a.m. in the morning. And I can guarantee you, as much as we love kids, we don't meet with kids at 11 p.m. at night. Next slide. We also worked with Marilyn O'Toole and John at Oregon State, and we built a chatbot for the Common App. If you go to the Access Companion, we built the chatbot. Two things that we learned: kids really need help filling out the Common App. Newsflash, I think all of us lived that in August, September, October. The second thing we learned is that the questions they're asking, at least through this chatbot, aren't quite what we might expect. Most of these kids aren't looking for strategy. They're trying to figure out how to self-report their grades. They're trying to understand what the character count is for the activity descriptions in the Common App. So those are the two bots that we've built. Next slide. Here's the ahas and the oh no's that we have from building those bots. We don't think it's really smart to build tools that basically are just a fake front end for ChatGPT. You can do that. You can just put your logo on it, change the entry screen, and make it your version of ChatGPT. All four of our tools start with our information, either our summer data set or the transcriptions of the Access videos or our own material. The second thing that we found is that giving users choices lead to impact. And if you've used our summer tool, I'm now going to disclose something to you. We trained it to give kids free options first, because we pretty much figured out if they're working with a college counselor or an IEC, they're probably hearing about programs that charge. Great programs like Polygens or the pay-to-play programs in the summer. We wanted to help kids who don't have that access, but what that said to us is you get to make choices, just like you get to make choices in your work with kids every day. Third aha, man, is it fun to play. And most of us, when we started our practice, enjoyed playing at that point. Oh no's, Jed knows this. I subscribe to 14 daily or weekly AI newsletters. I could actually, if I wanted to, describe to 1,400 daily or weekly newsletters. It's a fire hose. The second, oh no, and this is sort of my exhortation to all of you, there's just too many IECs and college counselors on the sidelines. It feels like Zoom 2 years before the pandemic. I remember being at a conference with peers and having an extended conversation about how virtual meetings were, and I quote, evil and not why I got into this business. There are too many people on the sidelines. We're ceding the conversation to nerds like me and or to computer scientists and engineers, and we need to get in the game. And then the final oh no, it does take some time and money to experiment. Full disclosure, our summer tool costs us about the fee that we charge a sophomore. So it's about the cost of one of our sophomores. And we just took the money and invested it ourselves to play with this. We don't make any money right now. We don't charge for it. We're just trying to figure out what the game looks like and where it's going. Next slide. Now, earlier in the spring, we did a bunch of training around using AI tools for your practice on the business side. On the website that I mentioned, that I think we'll just put in the follow-up note as well, it has an entire 1-hour video with a guy named Jeremy Kaplan, who is sensational. He's a Prophet Cooney, and he goes through, no joke, 80 different AI tools that small businesses are using. But he starts by saying, if you're going to think about AI tools for your practice, think about 5 things. What problem do you need to solve? What capabilities do you need the AI tool to solve? Is it accurate? What about the ethics of that tool? Do they respect the user's data? If you do your research, does it have implicit bias? And then how much does it cost as a subscription? And how much time will it take for you to actually figure out how to use it and call someone or email when it breaks, because it will break. Next slide. These are the tools that our team has looked at. Just as a frame of reference, it may look like a long list. There are so many tools. The largest single category of AI tool usage beyond Grammarly among IECs and college counselors is Zoom meeting summary tools. Otter, you could use the tool in Zoom. There's a really cool app called Blocks. There's a tool called Supernormal. God, who paid to brand that thing? And there's a tool called Fathom. Our practice is built on automation because we have 12 counselors and a lot of coaches. And so we use a tool called Zapier that sort of connects tools that don't connect. And it now has an AI interface. There's some really great note-taking tools that a lot of IECs use. The other day, I was on a call with Sylvia from San Diego. She gave the best Notion sales pitch I've ever heard. It's a great document tool. There are two IECs that I know that are playing around with a tool called Clay that helps you keep track of possible clients. It's sort of like a CRM, but not as expansive as the one in Counsel More or CPP or Guided Path. There's some really cool presentation tools. Just to be really clear, Jed and I did not use any of these tools to make these presentation. This presentation was made and crafted by human beings. There's some great image generation tools. And then Jed, the scariest part of Jed's thing to me is Sora. And the scariest part of Sora is that it will be here a year from now, guaranteed. Next slide. Okay. Coming towards the end. We all got into this business because we like asking questions. That's actually a prompt. We're really great at crafting prompts. When Jed kicks off with a kid to tutor him, he doesn't act like a robot. He starts by saying, I'm going to act like an experienced tutor. I'm going to ask a lot about the kid's learning style, who they are, what their goals are. And then I'm going to craft my conversation with that student based on what they told me. Jed is crafting prompts. All of you are great at crafting prompts. It's just the first thing we do when we use a new tool is it's like that wand in Men in Black. We immediately forget all the things we're good at. You're really good at asking questions. So when you're staring at that box on ChatGPT or Claude, locate yourself. Act as an experienced college counselor. Then give it the prompt. And then the second pro tip, that's just the start. It's supposed to be a conversation, just like a meeting with a student is a conversation. Not one question, then new questions. It's back and forth. Next slide. In our practice, we did a huge training in January on using AI tools. The most common use outside of essay work is college research. These are 5 different prompts, types of prompts that we've found a lot of success with. Now, I want to be crystal clear. Just like most kids aren't going to use ChatGPT to cheat and write their essay, we never use ChatGPT just to quote unquote make the kids' college list. But usually we don't have a colleague next to us. And at some point, you can only look at listservs so much, and you can't tour colleges every day. So these tools are great for college research. Next slide. This is a rubric that we use to evaluate our own work. One of the things you'll find the more you use AI is that it makes mistakes, but oftentimes it makes mistakes because you didn't tell it the right stuff. So this is a way that we evaluate our own prompts. Next slide. There are a bunch of prompt categories beyond list building. We use it to compare schools. A kid is looking for LD support across 5 schools. She also wants financial aid. She's a first-gen kid. And then we have a bunch of kids who have started to use it for interview prep. Next slide. What next? Here's my plea and my wish for all of us. Find a friend to work this through. Might be a person local you can get coffee with, might be a friend that you already Zoom with, might be somebody you went to conference or training with. Number two, for the next 6 months, every time you talk to that admissions rep friend at Stetson or Georgia Tech or USC, ask them about how they're using AI and ask your friends who are classroom teachers. And then finally, get involved, and specifically in the associations and communities you're a part of, be the advocate for ethics, equity, and access. Again, we blew this with social media. We have the chance to not blow it again. Jed, it's been a joy. I really appreciate you asking me to join today, and I'll pass it right back to you.
Excellent, thank you. I believe that is the end of our deck. So we do have some questions. We have some time for Q&A. It's 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, 8 o'clock where you are, Bob. We have some time. So why don't we, if you have any questions for me or Bob, type it in right now. And so let's field a few before we call it a night. The first question. Oh, thank you, Jane. Jane said it was a great presentation, Bob. Jane Hoffman. So thank you so much. Do we think that AI can get implications in essays? In other words, if the essay tells a story that implies the student has resilience or leadership or determination, but doesn't say it, could the AI bot properly describe the essay and the student's qualities? So can the AI tease out attributes of a student by reading what they write? Is that something that it could do for them, for the admissions office?
Uh, so I'll answer it, but I'll also disclaim that I've never worked at a college admissions office, and I am the worst essay coach in the galaxy. That being said, Claude and ChatGPT are great at evaluating writing if you tell it how to evaluate it.
Yeah.
If you give it a rubric, it is the dumbest intern in the world if you dump an essay in, and nobody on this Zoom ever would. Like, nobody on this Zoom would take a kid's essay that they're working with and violate all confidentiality and dump it in. But if you were to ask the tool, hey, what do you think of this college admissions essay? It will give you every bit as dumb an answer as you would expect. There's a great video. If anybody wants it, you can just email me, that Sydney Montgomery did a year ago using ChatGPT as a conversation partner. Using ChatGPT as a tutor for someone who doesn't have access to a tutor. It didn't write the essay for Sydney. But what I would say is, if you prompt the tool correctly, yeah, it's pretty good. Probably not as good as a uber experienced classroom English teacher or a really gifted essay coach or IEC, but it's pretty good.
This was research. I mean, UPenn was involved with this. There was like a Colorado and Penn did a thing where they were analyzing like several thousand essays from different admission cycles, answering this question. And they were looking for 7 qualities, and it actually was as accurate, like 9% accuracy as the human readers. So they evaluated several thousand essays that that were read by Penn admissions officers that scored based on these 7 criteria. Then they had the apps do it and compared them, and there was a great deal of inter-rater reliability. So to your question, like from what I've seen so far, the research I've seen, the answer is yes, that the apps are going to be as good or very, very close to being as good. And once you train the AI, you tell it who it is, you tell it here's a rubric, as Bob mentioned, and then you get accuracy almost equivalent to human readers. So yeah, so that's one of the reasons why colleges are curious. Can we use this? Because it might save tons of time, and then tell them. And Miami also, like Miami is looking at this and they're evaluating, are there certain things within the essay that, like that essay is 4 years ago, that then 2 years later, the kids were more likely to be on probation academically. They're trying to find out, are there things within there that human readers miss, but maybe tells for their problems ahead based on topics they write about, sentences they use, certain things. So they're looking at, for sure, what are the qualities of the student based on the essay that's written? That's definitely going to be a very valuable use case for colleges. So Bob, how do you use the AI tool for interview prep? Can you just kind of walk through a little bit your protocol?
Yeah. So I want to start by saying, hi, Michelle. You always ask the best questions on webinars.
Hey, Michelle.
So I'm about to explain to you how I do it, but I also want to disclaim by saying I'm a really strange IEC. Okay. And I love tech. Okay. So here's what we've found really successful for kids. The first thing is the kid needs to know what they want to accomplish in the interview, not just I want to show up, look attentive, and write a nice follow-up email. What questions do they want to ask? Okay. The second thing we do is that we have them do a little research on the school that they're interviewing at. The most recent one was a kid that is obsessed with Michigan. And we were like, you really have to stop being so obsessed. What are you trying to do? And they said, I actually would like to interview. And we had to break it to them. You're actually probably not going to get an interview at Michigan. But we let them go because we thought it would be a great way for them to research the school. So we had them create a Google Doc of all the cool stuff they found at Michigan in their research. And then we had them dump that into Claude, literally upload the document. And then the kid said, Claude, act as an experienced college admissions interviewer at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor and conduct a 30-minute college admissions interview with me. Now, in retrospect, I wish we had had the kids screen record. At the end of it, the mom said, I'm ready to sign up my next two kids. I've never had a kid more excited about applying to a college. Now, when we actually get to interview season, I think we'll know a lot more about how to do it. My beloved colleague, Belinda Wilkerson, she's much smarter than me, and she does this really cool cheat code where she has kids create scavenger hunts for their college tours. So she has ChatGPT create a scavenger hunt list, and she says, we're going to Trinity, create a scavenger hunt list for my college tour. It gets the most creative scavenger hunt. Again, is it replacing Belinda? You never could. Is it augmenting and adding creativity? Absolutely. Can I get the data question on Claude and GPT, specific data I want from the data set? It's terrible. It's actually not ChatGPT and Claude's fault. It's because colleges do the worst job in the world consistently posting the common data set. At some schools, it's a PDF. At some schools, it's a straight text file.
Yeah.
The thing that you probably need to understand, and it took me a while to understand this, is if you have to log into the data or download the data, ChatGPT isn't any better than an intern that you would pay. So you are categorically correct. The common data set is as poorly accessed through Claude and ChatGPT as it would be if you just decided I'd like to spend an hour looking for them. So what we've done, and it's a great question, is we try to narrow it down to very specific use and then use publicly available data. John at Oregon State is like the data nerd of all data nerds. Jeff Levy and Jenny Kent are so generous with their data. And then in our case, we feed it our data. But I just want to affirm your experience. And again, I'm not being an apologist for AI tools, far from it. But it's actually not the tool's fault. It's the fact that colleges, far before AI, just are horrible at consistently posting the common data set. Just ask Jeff and Jenny, they come up with their data in about 2 weeks. They literally spend months trying to pull common data sets from all the disparate schools and normalize them. And literally, there's not enough Nuprin or CBD gummies to solve their headaches. Scott, it's a great question. Yes, it can scan it if you upload it.
Yeah.
it just can't go on the web and scan 8,000 colleges common data set because the college doesn't consistently place the common data set in the same place, and it doesn't even consistently call it the common data set. Sorry, Jed, this is a nerd thing. I'll stop.
No, that's great. And part of it is like any document you have, you can send it and it can analyze it. It can like make you graphs from things. If you here's my Word document, I want you to evaluate, synthesize, bring this down from 30 pages to 5 pages. It's amazing at that. Like really gifted at synthesis and analysis. But yeah, so you definitely can upload either PDF or Word docs or point it to a certain web page. But yeah, it crawling, it's not as good at crawling and finding, analyzing without knowing exactly where every field is and so forth. So you sent the question before. I uploaded a certain PDF and it wasn't accurate. So it had a hard time reading the PDF. I mean, it could be the way it's crawling, the way the tables are aligned, that it's, I don't know, maybe it can't read every PDF in every format. I've definitely had it read PDFs for me. And there are specific, one of my students, he's at Northeastern, he has this PDF reader. It's a very specific technology. It's an AI with a certain kind of skin that he uses it constantly for helping with homework and things. So there's a PDF. It's a Honey Bear AI. There's something that I got to find it, but it's a certain PDF reading AI that's probably better than GPT because it's very specifically designed to read PDFs. But yeah, I mean, clearly it can't do all things. The
Somebody asked a question about crafting prompts. We did a guide earlier in the spring for a training we did. It's on the Bitly site. It's not perfect. We're certainly not people who charge to train other people on it. If you Google right now, there's about 6 different great resources. Microsoft, and I'm certainly not shilling for Microsoft, has a great free class on prompt engineering. I just loathe the term prompt engineering. MIT has 2 great resources. There are 2 school districts, one in Maryland and one in South Dakota, that have great prompt crafting for educators. But on the link that you'll get, it has like a 16-page guide that has a bunch of examples and a bunch of good practices that we've found. I mean, come on, it's 2 years old, this technology, so nobody is great at it yet. And we just got a little better because we did it together. And that would be the biggest thing is like, you can look at the guide, it's great, but you really probably should carve out a little bit of time, figure out the problem you want to solve and do it with a friend.
One thing that really helped me when I was learning how to play with this and how to do this a little better, it was just the simple phrase of, tell it who it is. Tell it exactly who it is, tell it exactly what it's good at, and then tell it its tone. And so again, like when I'm having it write stories for my 4-year-old, I'm telling this machine, so it's not generic, you are a masterful, creative, innovative storyteller who uses language, colorfully, playfully. You're fascinated with witches, magic imagery. I read a whole paragraph before asking any questions. I'm giving it all this background of who it is. So it's not just this generic machine. Like, no, you are you're masterful at this, you're creative at this, you're really funny, you're playful, you're clever, you're like all these things. Now, write me a story that's, 1,000 words long that includes this narrative arc, that includes characters, witches, but I've totally front loaded it with, so you're telling it, and also then the audience is a 4-year-old girl who likes all these things, but make sure there's a unicorn, all these things. But first and foremost, you tell it exactly who it is. And someone came up to me at the end of our talk in Atlanta at HECA. It's like, how do you do this? Like, how do you do this for college counseling? And I said, you are an expert college counselor with 20 years of experience. You're telling it exactly who it is. And it has like a frame of reference from that. When you tell it, oh, I'm not just some average person, but I'm an expert and so Bob's pulling up a resource.
So
But yeah.
this is a minor example, and Jed is, I think, preaching to the choir here in terms of what it actually entails. So where did it go? When we finally got our head around it, we thought of it as like that old game Mad Libs. Some of y'all may or be old enough like me to remember Mad Libs. So here's the Mad Lib for an effective prompt. Act as an experienced college counselor who is skilled at college research. So tell it that's who you're supposed to be, not a nerd, not a programmer. My student, describe the student. Provide an overview. You probably don't want to say 50 schools. 6 to 12 is ideal from our experience. Be more prescriptive than less about it. Tell it what you want it to focus on. Tell it how to structure the information. Ask it to summarize. And then this is the pro tip of all pro tips. Always ask it to source the information. One of our college counselors who's great and such a skeptic about AI now publicly says, I trust it better than I do an anonymous poster on the NACAC listserv. So what she's found is she can't ask that anonymous poster, can you give me the rationale for your opinion? She can ask Claude, why did you give me that answer? And can you show me your sources?
Excellent. Well, I think we've exhausted all the questions, Bob. So everybody, we love having you here. We know there are many friends in the audience. And we may do this again for sure. Bob is way ahead of me on this, and I don't read 14 daily newsletters, but he sends me the really good ones. And so I can pass them on to my team and my friends. But again, Bob, thank you so much for coming out for an hour. I look forward to talking again soon. And everyone out there, thanks for joining us, and look forward to being with you on Zoom or in person, hopefully sooner than later. So everybody, have a great night.